In 2015, Bishop Chris and Coulter McCarty from our Synod office here in Great Falls, Pastor Will Sappington from Billings, and myself were in South Africa. We were there especially to celebrate with the folks as they celebrated the 40th anniversary of the beginning of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Southern Africa. That's a whole other story that I won't go into right now. But we also had a couple of days of time where the leaders of the diocese were really busy preparing for this big rally, this big gathering that went on for a couple of days. And so honestly, they wanted to just send the Americans, get them a little bit out of the way so that they could do the things they had to do. And so we were we were asked to take the rental car that we had and go to a little community called Coffee Fontaine. It's in the Free State, if anyone knows anything about South Africa, close to Bloemfontein. You didn't see the picture that we had, but much of Southern Africa is dry, desert kind of like. Honestly, it seems pretty similar to Montana, at least in different times of the year, and some certainly areas around the state. We went to this small community, and as much of South Africa is, there was an area that traditionally, or at one point, had been mostly white folk, and then an area, especially because of the apartheid regime, there was a black township. And the black township was not too far, actually, compared to some areas from the white community. A couple miles, mile and a half or so, it really was relatively close. I really could give you no idea what the population of the area is, just because there's a lot of people crammed into fairly small areas. But I'm guessing, it could have been 10 to 15 to 20,000 fairly easily. It wouldn't have looked like that compared to what we're accustomed to. We met a man who took us to his house, who lives in what was at one point the white part of the town. There's a diamond mine in the Coffee Fontaine area, and he had a position there, and so was fairly well paid, and so had this big house, and it was very nice. And as we were there and spent a little bit of time, and especially by the next morning, it was real clear that there was no running water. They didn't mention that to us. We figured it out. And then we did ask the question. They said, oh yeah, the water main broke for the town a couple weeks ago, and we have no idea when it's going to get repaired. Just deal with it, basically. So one of the realities of being in a place like that is just understanding that what we're accustomed to and what we would think is normal is not necessarily the same somewhere else. As we were there, this man and a couple of other people from the congregation and the community wanted us to see a number of things. And so we ended up getting in the car and driving, kind of like if we were going to Dutton or one of the other congregations in our area here. We got in the car and we drove the 20 or 30 or whatever it was, kilometers there, obviously. And we got out and we went into the home of a woman, it seems, and her daughter who lived together. There were probably some children around, but I'm not sure where they were located at that point. It was a pretty small little community. There were dirt roads. The house was maybe 4 rooms, a living room and a kitchen and a bedroom and a bathroom. We were seated, because this is how it is in South Africa, seated in the living room, and they brought, I think it was Fanta, orange pop, to drink, and maybe some store-bought cookies, because that was how we would provide hospitality. And visit a little bit, and then we were on our way to see a local congregation that was just down the road, a small stone building, essentially just the one room, no toilets or anything connected to it. And then saw that, and then we went on to the next town that was bigger. And again, it's really hard for me to guess how big it was. But we were given a tour of the hospital, of the local hospital. And in my 5 times in South Africa, this is the first time that I had ever had the opportunity to get a little bit of a glimpse of what healthcare is like there. So we were brought into the hospital and walked around and toured around, and then finally talked to, I think, the nursing supervisor, who talked about the challenges of staffing, of getting nurses who knew what they were doing, and getting doctors, and getting supplies, and just the challenges of providing health care for several thousands of people when that was the only facility close by. Well, we went to a couple of different schools. One of them was, as we were talking to the headmaster of the school, my recollection is he was also the bus driver. We kind of understand that because this is Montana. There are places where that would be the way it is, maybe not here in Great Falls. But this headmaster talked about going out on Monday mornings and picking up the students and bringing them from 20 or 30 or 40 miles or whatever it was distance from these small farms out in the countryside, and bringing them into the community for school, and then taking them home again on Friday afternoon. Yes, you heard me right. Monday to Friday, the kids were boarded at the school. And I have to confess that it was impossible. It's really, really hard for me to imagine being a parent and putting a 6-year-old on a bus and saying, "I'll see you Friday." But if you want your child to be educated and have a chance at something better, you do what you have to do. So as we were there with these folks, it was a long day, and we were actually really exhausted. But it wasn't done, because at the end of the day, then we were taken to the township, the area where most of the blacks in the community live, who were forced to live into this area in the midst of the apartheid regime. Had a big tent and lots of chairs, several hundred, and for about 2 to 3 hours it felt endless in many ways. It was really long and daunting, and because we were the foreigners and the visitors, we sat in the very front row, and for 2 to 3 hours there was a wake for a man from the community. And for 2 to 3 hours a group from different churches would come up, and so it was ecumenical, and they would sing and dance, and then somebody would stand up and tell either a biblical kind of story and relate it to this man, and then somebody would translate it from whatever language he was speaking to another language that most of the people spoke, which was not English, by the way. And then that person would sit down, and somebody else would stand up, and they would sing and share another story, and then there was more singing from a different church group. Typically, and this was all men who were doing the singing, but the men in their prayer leagues in each of the churches, a multiple of denominations, of Catholic to Methodist to Anglican, I want to say maybe even something of the more evangelical side too, that they would wear a sport coat, all the same, matching ties, so you could tell which group they were all from, because they were all different color coordinated. But as they sang and as they shared stories, finally at the end of that, then they brought out food in those to-go boxes, we would say, on the white styrofoam. There was food for everybody who was there. Everybody grabbed a box. And the reality is, it's hard to say for how many of those people they came because there would be food. Or because they were there was food, then we better eat it. It seems to me it was something more on the haggis side, for those of you who know a little bit about Scotland. I have to confess, I wasn't real brave. I learned some things about myself in my trips to South Africa that way. I think I'm pretty brave, but I find I have a few limits. We gathered, and people ate, and there was conversation and laughter, and I have no idea what this man's life was like who died, but it sure seemed like he was loved and respected in his community. As the evening drew to a close, then we were taken back to the home of our hosts, and there was another meal spread before us. And so there was time for more conversation and food and sharing and learning about one another. For me, that period of time was the closest experience I would say that I have had in my 5 trips to South Africa to be given a glimpse of what life was really like, kind of on a daily basis. School, hospital, just being in people's homes, receiving hospitality, gathering for a funeral, just being with people who were just living their lives. But these people who wanted us to see a little slice of what life was like. And not with any sense of self-pity, but actually with a lot of sense of, we do pretty well with what we've got. And we're grateful. And this man, who is a lay person, not the pastor of the congregations that we visited, the pastor was out of town, took it upon himself to show us so much of this community that he lived in. Now, I share that with you because as I think of these words that I've just read for you from Luke's Gospel this morning about the story of Lazarus and the rich man, I think it's always helpful to note whose name we know and whose we don't. We know Lazarus, the poor man's name, but the rich man is just the rich man. Right? It's a sign, I think it's a glimpse, it's a little bit of a window, I think, into the heart of God, of wanting God's people to see, to really see with the eyes of the heart others. The ones who are different, the ones who maybe, to be honest, I would say that event, that experience for the 4 of us of this group from the Montana Synod, that was one of the most uncomfortable days that I have ever spent in South Africa. Partly because it was just so revealing. But it was also one of the days in which I've come to believe that we received one of the greatest gifts ever that I've received in my travels. To be able to see and to love and to be offered hospitality and graciousness from people who had no reason to. I think the nursing director had hopes that we'd be able to pull out a big fat check and leave some money there to help change the situation in that hospital. I wouldn't be surprised if that headmaster thought, well, maybe they'll be able to help in some way. We didn't do that because that's not what accompaniment is. It's not about saying we're going to come and fix things, because we can't, because there's so many areas and issues. But my heart was touched and opened. And by sharing this story with you, my hope is that you will be invited to have your eyes and the eyes of your heart also opened to see others, to see those here in this neighborhood, to see those here in this state, to see our sisters and brothers who are on the reservations, to see those who come through who are homeless and who today are outside who are cold and wet. And to not just see, because the rich man we find out he does know Lazarus' name, right? But to see and respond in some way. To respond. Thank you for your offerings for the hungry today. It's one little sign of how it is that we see others. May God's blessings and God's presence open your heart